Okay guys, so today we'll be talking about linting, automated test, and pytest. Now I'm going to first talk about automated test. Now what automated test is going to help you to do testing of your code and see if it's broken or not, and you don't need to do anything like mostly what happens is we write a code and then we print it and see if it's working fine or not. Okay, and let's say if we have 10 functions, we can save time with automated testing, and we don't need to like go one by one and print them out just to see the results if they're working or not. Now, automated testing is highly demanded all over the industry. Let's say you want to become a QA, but you're doing manual testing. Okay, if you can add automated testing into your arsenal, trust me, you're gonna have a better you're gonna be ahead than other QAs out there. Okay, and it is very rare to find an automated tester because someone who's good at coding, like usually it's hard to find someone who's good at coding and also good at testing. Okay, like developers, they're usually good at coding, but then to become a QA, you need to have a different mindset where you're able to find bugs, and you're able to think outside of the box, or you're able to think of a case which other people hasn't, right? And to save time, if you can use automated testing, you'll be finding like important bugs, and you'll be saving a lot of time for the enterprise, because they can, like, once they're finished with a feature, they can test the code and they can deploy it within seconds after using automation testing. Now for Python, there are two packages, which one of them is pytest and the other is unittest. I'm not a big fan of unittest, mainly because it takes a whole lot much more work, and I'm a big fan of pytest. Now for pytest, you can just basically use it with Django and any other projects that you want to. Now today I'll just use a simple problem in Python, and I'm going to show you how to test it. Okay. Now the problem I'm going to solve is that you'll be given a sorted array, and if it has adjacent elements, like this, adjacent identical elements, what it's going to do is that it's going to return a new array, and it's not going to have adjacent elements within. Okay. Now to solve this, what I'm going to do is that, okay, let me set up the environment first. Okay, so let's start a new project. Okay, I'm going to have the virtual environment installed here already, so let's create a virtual environment. Now, if you're wondering what a virtual environment is, it's basically it's an isolation of your packages into a separate Python file, and what it does is basically like it helps you to not have conflicts within different package versions. Okay, let's say you're using a different package version here and using a different package version in another project. Now you don't want both of them to have a conflict. Okay, let's go back. Okay, let's need task. Define, remove adjacent identical elements, and I'm going to take a sorted list as an input. Stack, I'm going to use a stack, and then I'm going to store the results in a list. Okay, now let's iterate through the sorted list. Okay, and in the first element, I won't be checking. I will just be storing the elements that I have. Okay, sorted list I and then here this one will be set list. Now from the second index I'm going to start checking it, right? Now the first thing I'm going to do is after the second index is I'm going to check. Basically I'll be peeking into the stack and see if the element matches or not. If the element matches, then I'm not going to do anything, basically pass or not. I'm going to store it inside the set list. So set list dot append sorted list I, and nope, not that, stack dot pop. Basically I'm removing the element from the stack and I'm going to store the new element inside the stack. Sorted list I. Now I'm supposed to return the set list, okay, and okay. Now to test this, what we usually do is that we run the function with an input and see if it works or not. Okay, so let's say this is the function. We're going to have the input. This is going to be a sorted list with lots of adjacent elements. Okay, now as it's going to result, let's say we're going to have the return element, right? So return list is equals to that, and let's print the return list and see what happens. Run has, yep, and we have 1 and 2, right? Now if we had 10 functions and we had to test each of them, this would be like a lot of tasks and pretty mundane, and I wouldn't want to do that. Now what I can do is that I can use pytest or any other testing tools to automatically test this. Okay, so first I'm going to do is that I'm going to install that framework inside the virtual environment. Now the thing is, like, pytest is not available. Like, it's not available, as in it's not provided within the Python that we have, unless like unittest. Unittest, you can just basically, you have the framework within, you can just import it. Okay, so I'm going to install pytest. There you go. Done. Now so for testing, you have to create a new module. Now the new module has to be named like within like test case, like whatever, you can use whatever name that you want, but you must have the test name within, right? It can be test underscore case, something like that, and then, or you can have something like case and then test. Okay, but whatever it is, you must have the name, or not it is not going to find it. Okay, so first let's import adjacent elements, and then now we have to write a function, and the function must also have the name test. The reason behind this is because what pytest does is that it uses string, like it uses a string matching pattern to see if like the test name is available or not. And then, so there we go, done naming it. Okay, now we're going to assert, we're going to send the list, and we're going to see if this results, like if we use this function, then the return that we get, whether it's equals to this or not, right? Now let's use pytest to see. Then the amazing thing about pytest is that's all we have to do, right? To test this, that's all we have to do. Now imagine we had 10 functions, right there. We had 10 functions. Okay, all we had to do was write just 10 test case, and just write, that's it, pytest. There you go. Everything would have just be done. Okay, now you might want to add more test cases, like let's say what if I'm sending a list of characters. Well, the amazing thing about Python is, you know, you can have all sorts of different variables into it and still consider as like the same thing. My bad. That is supposed to be the result. There you go. Now let's say you can have more test cases. Let's say, let me copy it. There you go, and let's test with edge cases. Okay, now in edge cases, what if you just literally send an empty, what happens then? What if you just send 1, you get 1. We run pytest, and now you see it has found 2 tests, right? And it has run them, and then you get the result. Okay, now you can probably see how easy it is to use pytest. It is also easy to use unit tests, but you just have to do a bit more of work. Okay, now before that, let me show you what happens if I remove the name test within. See, it just found 1 test, and that all it's ran. Okay, now you can see how important it is. Now what if I rename this? Okay, rename it, like let's say I remove case. Wait, I haven't refactored it yet. Yep, there you go. Now it can find anything. Okay, 0 collected, 0 items collected, no test ran, 0.01 seconds, right? Now like I said, so if it can't find the name test within, it's not going to run. So to do that, okay, I'm doing it again. Now it can find the test again. Great. Now let's see how to use unit test. Okay, now I'm not a big fan of unit test, and I haven't used it much either, but let's see. Okay, I'm going to go into their source code, and the source code you already have a documentation, so I don't need to go into their website to see the documentation. That's basically how you use it. Okay. Yep. So you go in there, and then you do that. Because I've already done this, I don't need to do this. Now I'm supposed to change the name of it. So then what they have is just that's it. Okay, so let me copy this. Okay, and we're going to have self. Okay, self assert equal, because we are checking if 2 elements are equal or not. So after running this, we are going to check whether it's equal to this or not. Same goes for here. Now you can see how much more work I have to do, and I'm still not a big fan of it. There you go, the first argument. Okay, and there you go, if the first argument is equal to the second argument or not. Same goes for here. Self assert equal and then self assert equal, basically the same stuff. Self assert equal, already tired, man. Okay, there you go, I'm done. I'm sure you're done. Okay, so for I think unit test, what you gotta do is that write Python and then write unit test, and also have there you go, true test ran, 0 seconds, all of them are okay. Now let's see if something goes wrong. This is supposed to be my result, and they're saying this is wrong. Okay, stir element and true test failed, 1 failures, right? Now they're saying that assertion error, so this is not equals to that. That's what they're saying, right? Now that's it. That is the usage of unit test. Now what my suggestion would be to write more functions and use like the testing kit that we have and write more test cases. Okay, now this is basically it about testing. Now what I'm going to do next is that talk about linting. Okay, now what linting is basically, okay, so linting is basically the process by which you actually see the quality of a code, or you see like, you know, if there's any bug in it or not, or see if you can make any improvements within the code or not. So it basically sees the quality of your code. Now in Python there is a package called pylint, which basically sees looks into your code and sees if it can make any improvements, or it also marks your code out of 10 and like tells you about, like, you know, gives you a suggestion of how you can improve your code. So I'm going to first install this package, install pylint. Okay, now the pylint works in the similar fashion of pytest. All you gotta do is pylint and then write the name of the file. There you go. Now it scored me 7.69 out of 10. Okay, and then this was talking on my previous run. Okay, now let's see what it went wrong, right? Okay, module task. Okay, missing module docstring. So I have to add a docstring. Okay, missing function or method docstring. Okay, consider using enumerate instead of iterating with a range, and length. Okay, this is a great suggestion, this one. Okay, if you go into it, right, what they're saying is that, like, I don't need to go inside those elements anymore. I can just basically have them right here. So let's say, let's use enumerate. Okay, so if you don't know what enumerate does, is you pass a list into it and then it's going to give you a tuple of index and element. Okay, so you're going to have the index in that particular time. Okay, and also the element. So I don't need to look into the list with the index just to see. So this makes my code way more cleaner. Okay, and there we go. Okay, this was one of the suggestion. Another suggestion was the using docstring. Okay, now, okay, well, basically this is how you add a docstring to it. Okay, you have, like, you use you basically write here, like, you know, the parameters that you're giving as an input and what you're returning as an output, and then you can also have a docstring about your module, which is suggested. Okay, now any good module, like let's say if you're working in an open source project, or let's say you're working you know, in the, like, you're working with the software, then in the big companies, they're going to ask you to write documentation of everything that you've done. Okay, like documentation, module doc strings of every function that you've written, how it works, what are the input parameters, what are the return types. You have to give examples and write codes of each and every one of them, so every time the next developer steps in, they know what they're doing. Okay, so this is basically a docstring. Now, usually you're supposed to write the description of the module that you're using. Okay, now let's see. There you go. Now this time it's been rated 10 out of 10, right? You can see how they have suggested me to use enumerate, and which makes the code way much more cleaner, because I don't have to look into that index of the list anymore. Python is doing that for me, and I have basically reduced a bit of coding right there. Okay, now this is not much important, but it just, you know, just tells you about the quality of your code and if you can make things better or not. Okay, now let's see, what about this one? Okay, test. Here we go. It is 4.17. It's saying that the standard import unit test should be placed before from task. Okay, now usually we're not supposed to, like, this is not the order of import. The first order is you, like, import the framework that you have inside your packages, and then you make the other imports. Okay, and then they're also talking about using doc strings and everything, right? You see, like, line too long. Okay, so now they're saying that in line number 19 it's too long. Okay, so they're saying line 20. Okay, they're saying that this line is way too long. Okay, and I must, like, you know, use indentation and go into the next line and make it more separate so that it can be readable. Like, okay, and that's it. Now, linting isn't that much of an important, but it just sometimes gives you a good suggestion. Like for this case, it suggested me to use enumerate for the case, and if you like, you know, just like tells you about the quality of your code, but it's you can also ignore it. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to talk about is pytest. Now, any good Python developer, okay, must follow this convention. It is a style guide for writing Python code. Okay, and it is so important that, you know, my code editor, like the IDE that I'm using, even they have suggestions. Like, look at here. Okay, they're saying, you see, pytest error 303, too many blank lines. Okay, so they're basically saying that I'm having way too many blank lines and I'm not supposed to have that. So if you go in here, you'll see that PEP8, they basically have convention of how you should write the Python code, right? Step by step. They also give you examples of writing, like the correct way to write a code, like using the indentation, and they also give you a suggestion of how to not do it. Okay, how to name the function, how to do everything. Okay, and if you go in here, like they'll give you more examples of how you should do it. Okay, like you see, you're supposed to use spaces, right? They're using spaces here and they're not. Okay, they don't wish you to do that. And almost every good Python developer that I know of will use this convention. If you want to work in an open source project, you must follow this convention. Okay, and when you like look into it, like let's say, you know, it'll also create a good impression if your code is written with PEP8 conventions. Okay, now let's say like you can also sometimes, you know, you can also write a class with, like, let's say small letter. Okay, now that isn't favorable as well. It's always going to ask you to write camel cases with capital letters. That is the convention. Okay, now let's say I reformat, and there you go. You're always supposed to have two spaces. Okay, for starting a new class, or like let's say a definition. Now I'm going to show you an example, like let's say inside the unit test, how the code is written. Okay, because this is basically a standard framework. Okay, let's go inside unit test. Okay, you can see they have written a doc string of everything, right? And then they have the import, okay, in order, and then they have also maintained the next line and indentation, right? Now let's go into, let's say, this one. Okay, now you can probably see, you see they have used 2 lines of gap after finishing this function. Okay, and they're going to maintain that same thing over and over again. Okay, now when you're inside a function, when you're inside a class, okay, you're supposed to like within each function, you're just supposed to have 1 line of gap, and you can see that they have followed that pattern all over again here. Okay, and when they're done, they'll be again using 2 lines. Okay, you know what, they're not done. I mean, there's nothing more to go in here. Okay, so yeah, that's basically it, and thank you for today.